Hey everybody, I'm Deborah with DC Fine Art, and today is part 2 of this color pencil piece that we were working on. Part 1, basically I was just doing the wood grain, just starting out with some of these boards, just showing how I put in my first layer. And this that you're seeing right now is still the first layer. So I know that we already kind of went over it. I actually went over it really quickly, that maybe I was like thinking to myself if I should slow it down just a little bit more, so that way you can kind of see me like what I was actually doing maybe a little bit better. So I was able to kind of put a little bit more time into this because the last week I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for a next color pencil piece or a next piece, and I wanted to do another little hamster picture. Since I absolutely love hamsters, I do have a hamster myself, and he's or she's my little pet. But yeah, I decided to draw another hamster one, and I absolutely love my first one, so definitely wanted to make another one. But in this one here, I'm showing you how I'm actually going with my darks to kind of darken it up with the darkest point. I do believe I showed that in the last video, but I kind of went really quickly through it. As you can see, this here is just me working kind of like in real time without speeding it up. But, and I mean, I'm kind of slower at it, so I mean, it doesn't go really quick. I go really slow. So, and I actually probably don't go as slow as some other artists out there who do work with color pencil pieces. But I'm starting out with just two colors for my darks. So the first one, I do believe, I was using my Derwent lightfast ones on these because they're really easy to blend. So you don't have to work in teeny tiny circles with a super sharp point on your lead, and you can still get some really smooth, creamy blending with them. So I do love working with those. You can work a little bit more messier than you would with like some of the harder color pencils. But I was using Midnight Black at the very bottom, and I was doing my little circles and just kind of getting the pigment filled in, and I would do several layers. I went on top of it and then went on top of it again, just putting down a lot of pigment on the paper. Now I didn't push down really hard because I didn't want to like burnish or indent. Now whenever I'm putting in some of these lines in here, trying to make my wood grain lines, I do push just a little bit harder so that way it kind of does make an indentation. That way the pigment stays in there, and when I blend over it with my brush, my OMS, those lines still show underneath, kind of showing the wood grain kind of popping out through that dark. And I do use a darker color like the Midnight Black for that. The other dark color that I use on top of it, now I'll do layer on top of the Midnight Black with a dark indigo, and that way it's got some of those blues kind of coming out in there too. And then after I do that, then I layer on top with like a chocolate, so that way it transitions from a darker brown into the dark indigo and the midnight. So a lot of different colors. I know that I use so many different colors on this piece that it's really hard to just say, okay, this color goes here, this color goes there. It's not like that. I mean, my reference photo that I just took bits and pieces of different maybe textures or wood grain look to it, that maybe I liked a certain piece and put that piece here or this piece there. Or I think even at the end I even made it up, just didn't even have really a reference photo for it, just kind of made it up in my head. But the colors don't even match that. It's just something that I wanted to pick out. Now I use like my dark chocolates to make my lines, my darker lines at the bottom. And then if I want to go up and it starts lightening, I'll use like a natural brown, or maybe even a sepia to give a little bit more of a reddish tone to it. Or, you know, you can just kind of do what you want when it comes to using some of the browns and stuff. There is no right or wrong in this on the colors. So, and as many as I did have, it's crazy. I couldn't list them all off. There were just so many of them. I mean, I know I did like brown ochre, yellow ochre. Um, I even used some reds, of course, the sepia. the red sepia. And let's see here. I think I even used, let's see here. What was the reddish color that I used? I think I might have it here handy. Maybe. I got them so mixed up everywhere. Oh, it was raisin. I used raisin in there too for some of that reddish tones. But then I also used to bring out some orangey tones like a dark honey, and I think there's even a Mars orange that I use later on whenever I'm starting to bring out that candlelight and going across. Then I'm going over it with some of that orangey and yellow tones to kind of make the light of the candle kind of reflect off of the wood. Now, like I said, this is kind of a little bit slower of what I was doing before, just putting in my design. Finally got my brush out so that way I can brush some of that away, which I actually need to get me an actual brush. I had one. I went ahead and got me one and got me ordered a little brush where I can just dust off the eraser dust instead of having to use my, oops, sorry, hopefully that wasn't too loud. So that way I don't have to use my mop brush. But here I am just kind of making up my design of what I want in this wood, whether or not I want to put a knot in it or if I'm wanting to do some swirls and stuff, you know, it's just kind of making it up. And here I am, I'm just going to be just kind of drawing it out and designing it. I work really slow, so I hope you guys don't mind. And I know if you guys already seen this in the last video, it's just basically a little bit of a slower, just kind of showing you how I did the wood grain from the video before. This is kind of like a refresher, and it's a little bit slower. But see, I'm taking this one here is a chocolate, so just using some of the darker lines, and if I use them more closer, the lines are more closer together, then I'm getting some more of that chocolate in there. And if I get the lines really tight and use a lot of the chocolate, then it tends to be a little bit more of a darker patch of wood, which is perfectly fine because there is dark patches in the wood. So I did see that in some of the reference photo that I was looking at. It had some areas where it had like a darker patch. So that is perfectly fine to do that. And I just do it by using some of my chocolate and just kind of making the lines of the wood really close together. It almost looks like you're going on top of the line because with the Derwent Lightfast, it's really hard to hold a point that's really super sharp. You would not like a polychromos because you can use it at the very beginning and have a sharp point, but after you go back over it again, it really dulls down really quick. And that's just because it's a much softer lead and it's so much easier to blend. So it's a very, very good blending pencil. That and your Derwent drawing. The Derwent drawing is also a super, super soft lead and is very creamy and very easy to blend also. So I do like using these for my first layers is by using some of the Derwent Lightfast or the Derwent drawing. Occasionally I will pick up my Caran D'Ache luminance because I absolutely love those pencils. Those still blend really, really nicely. It holds a lot sharper of a point for detail too than these other two, but yeah, it's a good one too. I love them. So here I am just creating my design in the wood. And like I said, I'm using several different colors, maybe using a sepia from a natural brown to a dark brown to a raisin for some reddish areas if I want them to be more reddish. on this very far part, since it is further away from the candle, I am expecting this board to be a lot darker. So it's just, I will have to go back over it. Well, you guys will see it and later in the video whenever we get through this one little portion, just to kind of show as a refresher. I will be doing a lot more darkening of the wood, adding in some more shadows, and I will be adding in some lights too, because I'll actually get the flame done in this video. So I'll do a little candle flame, and then the like the yellows and stuff like that, or the reflection off of the wood, and then darkening and shadows of the wood. So yeah, there's a lot in this video, and I hope you guys are enjoying this. Definitely clicking the like and subscribe definitely helps me out tremendously. And like I said, if you're new here or you haven't hit the like or subscribe, I'd love to have you aboard, and definitely hit the subscribe button. It helps me out, and so does the likes too. That gets the video shared out there. So gotta love YouTube's algorithm. And like I said before on the last video, I do the, I always say, I don't know why I've got the thing going on, but whew, I'm gonna need to try and cut out my ums. But I usually do the powerful packs, and I do the reviews. Now, since I am out traveling on the road, I am unable to get home back home to be able to get that box. The box is at home, but I'm not at home. So unless I'm trying to keep my son away from using them, which I highly doubt that. I wish my son would more wanting to be in more artistic stuff, but oh, he's not. He is definitely a child who loves his games. So yeah, I can't get him to do any artwork. He did take one art class, and I'm super proud of him. So yay. I guess that is an accomplishment. Finally got my honey doing some art stuff. Super excited. And I got to see some of his artwork that he brought back from school, and yeah, he's it's kind of funny. I mean, he does a good job. It's just very interesting and unique. It's very unique. It's nothing that I would have ever thought, of doing. Like, he did like this fish, and the fish was like, I don't know, like humongous, and it was supposed to be underwater next to a pirate ship and something else. It was like, I don't know how to describe it, but it was more like he's very animated, and it was very different. It was just way out there. Whenever they tell him to draw a fish, and he thinks of the fish inside of an aquarium. So I don't know, maybe he needs a fish. Maybe I need to get him a fish tank and a fish. He likes turtles, but he's got a turtle, but yeah, I don't know. He might not like a fish. I don't know. He doesn't really like, he likes his turtle. We'll see if he eats a fish to his turtle, which I'd have to keep them both separated. But anyhow, um, yeah, but doing some of these lines, or about the powerful pack. Sorry about that, guys. I got sidetracked on my son. Jeez almighty. All right. Well, the powerful pack I'm unable to get to, so I'm actually going to be doing that review a little bit later. So it will be during Thanksgiving week. I will be able to review that, do the box opening. I know it's going to be late, but I'd rather just go ahead and do it. And even though it is late, I still think it would be fun to experiment with what they're going to be giving me, and then also share that to you and show you what I create from it using the products that they give me, which is always kind of a challenge itself, because sometimes I'm like, I mean, it all can make the supplies, but I'm always wanting to add stuff to it. That's just how I am. I'm like, oh, I can do this and do so much more with it, and I can use something else, and that's what really holds me back. And then trying to come up with something really quick. So it's definitely a challenge. But yeah, that will be for Thanksgiving week. Which is kind of sad because then I'll be leaving back out. So I don't know, my paletteable packs are going to be like falling behind, which I hope you guys don't mind. I'm usually just doing it just to have fun, kind of show what they are. I know everybody can kind of see them. If you're wanting to see them open as quickly as possible and see what it is for that month, I mean, I know there's plenty of other YouTubers out there doing the paletteable pack little box openings like as soon as they get them. I'm just a little bit late. I'm a little bit behind because of my work and my travels. So I just kind of get to it whenever I can. So it ain't going to be like right off the bat. I wish it would. That would be a dream. I would love it to be right there whenever it happens and I get it in my mailbox and I get to open it, and that would be just the simplest things would be a dream for me. So I'm always busy working, whether I'm doing artwork or with my normal job, like my regular job. Yeah, I'm always busy. I don't think there's ever a time whenever I'm just not working. Like I'm always working, which is good. I guess it keeps me occupied and always got keep myself busy, should I say. So I'm almost done with these lines. I know these lines are taking, a little bit to do, but that's just something that kind of goes with it if you're wanting to do something that has a little bit more detail. I know that sometimes if you did an even more finer detail, it would probably take a whole lot longer than what it is right now. But this is just kind of real time showing you guys what I'm doing without having to speed it up real quick, and you guys can see how I create this one little board or this little plank, and then we will go on to, well, actually I'll just go ahead and kind of fly through it, fast forward through it, I guess you can say. You can see me kind of creating it really quickly, just kind of creating the rest of the boards, and then I'll slow it down whenever it gets to doing some of the highlights and the dark shadowing and the little candle flame, so that way you guys can see that. But like I said, with the lines here, I'm just going from using my dark chocolate on the top and then going to natural brown, or using some of my sepia, my red sepia, in just some of these areas. And then once I get through with these, this is where I'll end up coming through and start adding in some of my, I guess you could say just kind of my filler colors, like the shades in between the lines. Does that make sense? Like doing the filling in the color of the wood color. I'll be doing that. All right, so here I am filling in that wood color. It is a warm earth. I know that I took that color out of my Derwent drawing, and like I said, it's a really smoother, richer blend. Um, it's very easy to blend, but I'm using that. It's a little bit more of a darker color of a brown, but not as dark as like the chocolate or anything. But I'm using that at the very bottom, so that way it goes like from dark to light. And then once I get to the top of the wood, I will use that again to kind of bring that darker color in back in from the top. Now, the rest of the filling of the wood, I do use like a brown ochre and a yellow ochre Let's see here. It's pretty much just the brown ochres and the yellow ochres that I use for my fillers. My lightest color is, I'm trying to see if I can find it for you guys. Well, I know I did use also a brown ochre 50% out of the Caran D'Ache. That was the one Caran D'Ache that I did use. See if I can pull some of these colors out and see if I can find that one. Yeah, it was just the yellow ochre that I used in the Derwent Lightfast for my lightest color. So all the brown ochres that I used, I think the yellow ochre out of the Derwent Lightfast was the lightest that I went. So there's the lightest color, the Derwent or the Lightfast, and it's the yellow ochre. And even though I'm going to go back over it and shadow it and make it darker, and you know, I'm adding in all these colors, and you may think, okay, well, you're just going to kind of cover them up. You know, every little bit counts. Even by taking these steps, sometimes those colors may show through just a little bit or have a lighter or darker tone based off of the colors you're using for the first layer. So that's the reason why I do it that way. Is because all those layers that you put in there with multiple colors, they do show through, and it does add a lot more character to your piece. And there I'm adding in a little bit of that shade to make it a darker patch in the wood. Like I said, this part of the wood is supposed to be my darkest part because it's further away from the candle. So I'm just kind of adding in some more of this darker tone of this warm earth in there and bits and pieces to kind of tone it down or give it a little bit more of a darker shade. Yeah, I'm kind of just going back and forth. I'm not really filling in circles because I am working with like wood, you know, so it's gonna have, I want it to have some texture in it. I don't want it to be super flat. Kind of added in some darker areas with this warm earth color, kind of going in there and kind of shading some areas. Then I'm going back in with my yellow ochre and just kind of putting in some lighter areas in there. So I am mixing it up. I'm just kind of going in and filling in some of the areas that I, you know, kind of left out, which is fine. You know, I didn't want to fill everything in solid one color. I wanted to go back in with a different color and kind of add it in to some of those areas. And it should be time for blending with the OMS, so I'm just getting that out right now. All right, so I got my brush with my OMS, and I'm just kind of blending this in, being very careful not to go too wild into my other areas or like my teacup. If it does, I will have to use the titanium white mixture from Brush and Pencil and some of the touch-up texture just to kind of create a white, kind of like a paint-like substance that actually goes on color pencil. So if you're needing to kind of cover something up or go over it, I can use that to kind of touch up on some areas that maybe I got into, like the little teacup or a plate or something. I can usually go back and put the white back in, and then I can go over the top of it. It is archival, and it is definitely safe to use with your color pencil. That's what it's meant for. So when doing some of this wood grain, after I get done doing some of the dark here and just kind of getting some of those, touching up the edges around there, I will be going in the same direction as the wood grain. So I'm kind of going an up and down kind of stroke, just kind of going with the wood. Now, if I'm going right around the teacup, I do tend to be a little bit more careful and kind of go around the teacup little handle. But after I do that, then I kind of bring it back up, so that way I'm kind of going with the wood grain direction. Now here I'm dipping my brush in the OMS, and then I'm wiping it off on a paper towel to where it's not like dripping wet or anything. I don't want it dripping wet when I go to the paper with it. I just want to dip it in there, and then I want to brush one time, just kind of do a little quick little swipe on my paper towel, and then I go back over onto my piece and start blending. Now, if you start getting into your second layers, you want to be careful on how much OMS you have on your brush, because if you put too much OMS on your brush and you even just do one swipe, you may have too much OMS. And what that will do on your second layer, it will basically kind of get rid of the second layer, kind of smush it around, but then you're bringing the underneath layer back up, and you're not really layering it, you're kind of taking it off, and you don't really want to take off what you put down. So you're going to have to be very, very careful on your second time of putting your color pencil down if you're using the OMS, unless you're wanting to kind of create like a wash kind of look, where you're just kind of bringing in that darker color and doing kind of a wash, so that way you can kind of bring what's up underneath of it slightly through. I mean, you can do that, but if you're wanting to keep that color in, you don't want to use too much OMS and basically undo what you did, or at least make it more washed out. You want to keep some of that pigment on there, and it will still blend your color pencil. It just won't oversaturate it and then eat away at the underneath part, because then you'll have missing pieces and your color pencil will be kind of botchy or splotchy looking, and you'll have like kind of an unevenness to your painting. So you want to be careful on your second layer. I usually dip my brush in OMS and I'll wipe it off to where, a few times to where it's almost dry, but it's not completely dry. And then I go back on and I can actually just kind of work with it. You just got to make sure you have enough pigment down whenever you do your second layer. And you don't want to do too much to eat away that top layer, bringing out the underneath layer, and then you have kind of like a splotchy looking painting. So it's just kind of cool how whenever you bring the OMS out and you start using it, it just comes to life. Like that's how it always feels to me whenever I'm working with color pencil. Like I put in so many different colors, so many different details, and it doesn't really come out, or at least stand out like something, more realistic. You just kind of have all these colors, you have all this, textures and lines that I created. But then once I add in those fillers in between the wood, making the wood colors, and I go in with my own mess, it seems to like all come together so smoothly and so nicely. I just love how it just does that. It's almost like waving a little magic wand or something. It's like, ta-da, look what you can reveal. All right, so here I am actually just kind of drawing in my little split between each board. I'm just going ahead and adding my or actually it would be my dark indigo, and then I put my black in the center of it. And that's how I create the boards, like the split between the boards. And I'm just kind of filling this in, so that way I'm already kind of ahead of the game on where I'm wanting to put the boards. And then I wanted to add an extra little piece in there, which I just kind of drew out. And it's basically like a hole in the wood. So where the wood had kind of broken and you can kind of see out. And since candle is burning, I was like, well, it can be nighttime. So it's going to be like just dark, like a nighttime kind of look through. Now here I decided to change my candle. So, like I said, I don't usually stick to every single little thing. Sometimes I think things need to be changed or adjusted, and I do so. So, here I'm actually just creating a wick kind of in the center of the candle, and here I am just kind of drawing it in very, very lightly with my, I do believe I use my chocolate, or maybe I use like a darker brown, maybe of, not for sure which one I used, but it's just one of the color pencils. It's a darker one. And here I'm just kind of drawing in a wick in the center of my little candle, and then kind of making an opening where that candle's kind of sitting in the center there. So yeah, I definitely changed changed what the candle looks like just a little bit. And then the flame on the top, in the reference photo that I was looking at, it was just solid white. So there wasn't really no character to the candle like I was wanting it to be. I wanted to have more of a yellow or an orangey look, or, just have some sort of color in there besides just plain white. I didn't really like just plain white. So I also changed up my little candle so that way it had a little bit more character to it. So I am using several different types of yellows in here. Um, Goodness gracious, I don't know if I could even tell you which one was the brightest yellow. I may have used like a buttercup yellow and maybe some other ones, but yeah, I just kind of used some yellows in there. Maybe a little bit of an orangey yellow for like the top. So here I'm just kind of drawing that in. That one there is more of a cream color from the Caran D'Ache. I think it's like a buff. No, it ain't the buff one. See, this is what happens when you have so many different colors. It is really hard to keep track of each and every color, which is why I said I don't think I can be able to tell you guys each and every color that I used. Otherwise, the list would be pretty long. Not as long as the reference that I did, like the swatch that I took, that sheet. It won't be as long as that. But I may have used like I don't think I used the Primrose, but it could have been like the Primrose and the Caran D'Ache set. Something more creamy, like really light. More of these orangey yellows. The center will be white, so I will have more of a whiter tone in the center. And then in one of the other reference photos that I was kind of using, and all these reference photos I just got from Pixabay, and basically there are so mixed up and chopped up. It's crazy on the different things that I've done, and just kind of looking and seeing how things are laid out. So like this candle flame is totally different from what the candle reference photo is, and the wick also. So yeah, it's kind of like a Frankenstein piece. It's all put together with different things and different references just to kind of get an idea. There I am coming in with my white, and I'm using the Derwent Drawing Chinese White. I really do like the white on the Derwent Drawing Chinese White because it's just really white, and it's really easy to, it's really even easy to layer on top of other colors. It's really opaque, but I use that one. It's more of that primrose just to kind of blend it in, like a creamy color, just kind of blend it in from the yellow to the white. And if you're really wanting to be super, super white, using some of that titanium white mixture from Brush and Pencil, and the the touch up texture from Brush and Pencil, those would be really good to add like an extra speckle of super white in there if you wanted to. Here I'm kind of using some different colors. I do believe that's like almost like a Naples yellow, or it could be the yellow ochre, but it's a similar color to that. Now here I'm taking like this dark brown, that would be kind of like the chocolate color of the luminance, but I use the Castle Earth and the Caran D'Ache luminance for this because it's more of a sharper point. It just won't blend like all over the place in my candle. So I did use that, and I can get a sharper point, kind of work on some little details in there by adding some of this darker Castle Earth to it around the wick. And then I will take out kind of an orangey brown. I don't know if that's like a it's like an orangey brown. I do believe it's from the Caran D'Ache luminance that I used. But I used it to kind of go around. It's more like a rusty orangey brown to kind of go around the Castle Earth color. So that way it kind of goes from brown to an orangey brown to the yellows that's in there and oranges. Adding in some of that primrose in there, seeing some little marks in my flame and my reference photo, so definitely wanted to add those in. It's more of the Castle Earth just kind of coming up the sides. Adding in those little peaks of the flame on the internal flame there. And adding in some of this orangey color in the center. Kind of brings those colors together. Using some of that cream color or that primrose to kind of blend it on top, going into the white. And then using some of the white to kind of bring it down into it also. That way it has more of a smoother transition, is all I'm doing there. Kind of smoothing out those edges with my white. Try to dust it off with my hand, and that didn't work out very good, so I had to use my little brush. So here I'm kind of fast forwarding this a little bit because this here is going to be basically me working on the wood. Now the only difference with this piece of wood compared to all the ones that I have worked on it with, it's going to be the same kind of concept, using some of my reds like my raisins, adding that reddish tone where I want in the wood. I'm still doing the filler, like doing the Castle Earth, going from dark to light. So I'm still kind of doing the same thing, except I'm not going to have that deep dark shadow right there by the little chocolate muffins, or the little muffins there. They're not going to have the dark shadow behind it because the candle is so close, it wouldn't be really going down that far. I guess with the shadow wouldn't be coming up that far with the candle being there. So the only difference that I'm going to be doing with this picture or this piece here would be adding in a little bit more of my yellows and my oranges at the very end. And that's after I go ahead and add in all the rest of my colors, I will go in and add some oranges and some yellows. That way it has more of that tone of the candle reflecting off of the wood already in my first layer. So that way, whenever I do my second layer, I can go back over it and bring out some more of the yellows and orangey tones if I need to. Like if I'm happy with it and I don't want to add any more, then I won't. But if I'm like wanting more, like just looking at the picture at a whole and just kind of seeing that candle, like if you can just imagine in your head the candle just glowing and just kind of coming out, then I kind of know how much I want to put more into the yellow, like put more yellow in or put more orange in, then I can do so. But I really like seeing the whole picture as a whole before I really make some, you know, really let's just say, I don't know how to put it, some really strong choices, like choices that would be harder to back out of, like sticking in some really dark shadows in places and cannot, be harder to undo that. So it's best to stick in your darker shadows and everything else, or at least that's the way I like to do it, is toward the end, so that way I can kind of get the whole picture in my head, like the way I see it, because there is no reference photo to what I'm doing. So the candlelight and all that stuff reflecting off the wood, creating a shadow, is not in the reference photo. And yeah, I'm just kind of creating this and kind of in my head on where I would see that light kind of show. But if you use a reference photo for it, it probably would be good if you had it, like, even if you had like a little candle, or you want to recreate, it doesn't even have to be wood, but just kind of recreating the scene where you have the candle and you can kind of see where it glows and how far it glows out, then you could easily take a picture of that and use that as your reference photo. But here I just kind of went ahead and just pictured it in my head the way I think it should look like, I guess. And see, like this picture in this wood here, like the wood grain that I did here, I totally just saw like a little piece that kind of looks similar to this in the reference photo that I was doing, except that it was much, much smaller. It wasn't like, that wasn't the whole wood plank. I just went ahead and loved the way the design kind of looked, and I drew something similar to it and just kind of magnified it. So that way it just kind of stood out. I love the designs and definitely wanted to bring out the designs, kind of like magnified them and made them bigger. So that way it kind of took up more, had more of a detailed look to the wood. Here I am adding in a lot of my yellow ochres, brown ochres, and then I'm taking a little bit of the yellow and adding some yellows and oranges into it. So that is the only difference so far that I have been doing different than the rest of the wood, is that I'm adding in some yellows and some oranges. And that's after I started adding in a lot of my base tones, like my normal, doing like the wood the normal way, and then doing the filling with the brown ochres and yellow ochres and stuff like that for my lightest. After I get done doing that, then I'm going back through and kind of splotching it with some yellow and some oranges. The oranges are like if you're getting further away from the light, like it goes from yellow to orange, like the further away. So that's why the orange is there. And now I am starting to blend in with my own mess. And like I said, if it didn't stand out as much with the yellows, or if I need more yellow in it or more orange in it, then I can always do that on my second layer. And I'm kind of speeding through this because it's basically the same concept as what I did whenever we were going slower with it. It's just, like I said, just adding the yellows and the oranges. for tones. This is always my favorite part. Whenever I'm doing the OMS, it's always my favorite part because it just like comes to life. You get to see all those different colors, everything that you did, and it just all comes together. And see, you can tell that that wood grain right there has more of a yellow tone to it. So here I'm going to do the same kind of concept. Since it is a little bit closer to the candle, I'm going to add in some more of the yellows and less of the oranges. Like, I'll still add maybe some oranges toward the top or the bottom, but as far as being close to the candle, it will be more of a brighter, like the brighter yellows, getting closer to the candle. Here I'm just kind of making a design for my wood. And I'm using in this piece here, since it is closer to the candle, I'm using my raisin, that more reddish tone, in the wood grain, because the wood has a slight reddish tone anyway in the little details that it has, but this one here had some really major red tones to it, and I definitely wanted to put this one like close to the candle to where it's illuminating it and it has more of a red tone to that wood. So I definitely wanted to make this piece of wood here a little bit more unique and have more of a reddish tone to it. So that's why I'm using some more of my raisin color. And I will use my sepia and my natural brown in some of those areas too, creating some of the lines. I do add my chocolate lines, like my darker chocolate lines on the top and the bottom, here and there. So all those other colors that I use, they definitely didn't go away. I'm just using them maybe some more than the other. And then I'll be filling it in just like I would with the others. I use the yellow ochre and the brown ochres to fill in my wood grain fill, but then I'm just adding more yellow and a little bit of the orange, but not as much, but more yellow tones. And I know the two different types of yellow tones that I used. Let's see if I have these with me. I think I use these two. I use like an amber gold, or the golden, in the amber golds in the Derwent lightfast, and then golden bismuth yellow in the Caran D'Ache luminance. And I think my brightest yellow was actually in my pro colors. Yeah, it was like the buttercup yellow. I do believe I used that in out of my Derwent pro color as being one of my brighter yellows. Yeah, it always looks really weird. Like, I got this really kind of different design going on with this one. This one here definitely is going to have a lot more reddish tone to the wood. And then I'm adding in a whole lot more yellow than I did before, a little bit more orange on the top and the bottom, but majority toward the center of where the candle is, it's a lot more yellow. Right, here comes the Omus. I always like seeing this part. This is always my favorite part. It's like, what does it look like? Let's do the reveal. So there I am, blended it in. You can see those reddish tones are really popping out now. Couldn't see them as good before, but now you definitely do. Here I took my little OMS brush and kind of blended out the center of the candle and around it. Just, I don't know why. I didn't really need to have it blended. It was actually pretty good, but I did anyway. I don't know if I just felt like I had to or wanted to, but I did. So here I'm creating more of the wood grain pattern with this one, but here I'm using a lot more of a lighter color. I think that one there is that light primrose, but I'm just gonna try and make it more lighter. Now, I did start adding in lines for my wood grain in there, and then I got to a certain point where I got really close to that flame, and I started to stop and then just make little marks, not continue it toward the flame. I left a gap between the flame and the little wood grain. And I did that for a reason. It was just that it was so close to that little flame that I know that if you had a light burning or a little candlelight burning and it's shining right close to something like that, basically it's going to be like a whiteout. It's going to be super, super bright, that it's going to have a little bit of a white glow in that little area. So I didn't want to get too close there to it. I wanted to have that little look to it, like it was super bright and the little lines didn't go all the way. Now here my my light starts making his way into the camera, so you're just gonna have to forgive me for that. I didn't really notice that my light was moving, but I guess I had my little like where my picture was like taped down to this board, and the board started moving over and it was a little bit lopsided, and I guess it made a vibration, and my little daylight lamp light started kind of moving down into my camera. So I noticed it and then pushed it back up real quick. So sorry about that. I guess my little light wanted to be in the video also. There it is, see? And now it's gone. So I noticed it. Sorry about that. Here I'm adding some white just right in and around that flame. And then I'll start doing in my fillers. Same way, using my yellow ochres, brown ochres, but I'm using a lot more of the, trying to stay as light as I can around that flame. There's the warm earth kind of coming up from the top. Warm earth on top of that, just barely a little bit. But I'm wanting to keep this more of a lighter kind of color. And then now my yellows. And of course I'm going to be adding in my yellows to this quite a bit around the candle. But then toward the base of the candle, right in this area, I'm going to start adding in more of my oranges. Actually, that light tended to get in the way again. Huh. There, I moved it. There we go. I moved my board. Now it shouldn't have that problem no more. Sorry about that. But here I'm blending in with my OMS, kind of going around that candle for now until I get the rest of this blended. And like I said, this is the first layer, so once I get done with the first layer and I'm going to do the second layer, I'm basically going to either lighten or darken, like adding more yellow tones to it or maybe adding some darker tones to it, and that way it kind of goes with each other, kind of blends with each other. So now here I'm working on this very last piece. This is where it shows basically like the outside, and it's going to be super dark. So here I am working in layers. I'm adding in my dark indigo all over. So the whole thing is just like dark indigo. And I go over it again to where I'm adding in several layers. So that way I get a nice pigmented, rich color saturation to be able to blend with. And then I'm going over it with my midnight black. But I don't extend that midnight black all the way down. I'm just doing just the very top with the midnight black over the dark indigo, so that way it transitions from light to dark also with the sky. So here I am with my OMS, blending that out. And see, whenever you blend it out, it has more of a bluer tone to it, like a little bit more of a lighter tone, but whenever you blend up here at the top, you're getting more of a darker color, like a dark black with a blue kind of tone to it, like a darker blue. And so it does transition, even though it is kind of harder to see on the camera. That's just, it definitely looks like that in person. So here I'm doing my last board. Before we go on to the second layer of just basically adding in more colors, more vibrancy to this piece. Adding in more yellows where it needs to have it, blending them out, and just kind of doing some of the shadowing also, which definitely makes a big difference. I definitely worked on this piece for quite a while doing some of this wood, but I mean, it is definitely worth it taking the time and just working on it like this, just little by little. It's definitely worth it at the end. So here I'm just kind of creating a little design, not really much of anything. I made another little hole in the wood there. So I'm going to have to fill it in with some of my dark indigo in the center. There it is, dark indigo. I put a little bit of dark indigo also in that little notch right in the bottom too, because it is super dark. More doing my filler. There's my warm earth. More of my brown ochres, some of my dark earth or warm earth in there. Taking some of my lighter white and stuff and adding it in that little highlight in the wood. Now here I am adding more of my yellows in and some of my orangey tones at the bottom. A little bit on top too, I do believe. There it is. And once I'm done with that, I am getting my brush out so that way I can start blending with the OMS. And I'm very lightly just kind of going in the grains of the wood the same direction. I'm kind of blending out in and around some of the areas because I don't want to blend, you know, my dark areas that's really dark and blend it into what should be my lighter areas. So I just want to be very careful with that. All right, so here I am adding in some of my second layering. Now I will be going back over some of these areas with the same kind of colors, like some of my yellow ochres or some of my brown ochres in there, and just kind of replacing them if they need to. And I'm redrawing some of the lines using my chocolate or my natural brown, even the sepia, just kind of going back over things to kind of refreshen them and kind of bring them out if they got blended away and was a little bit neutral and I wanted them to stand out. Now I do go back in with some of these areas with some reds that needed to have where I had the raisin. I'll go back in with some more raisin in it, maybe even adding some oranges. And this piece of wood here, I'm going back over with some yellows and oranges because it needed to kind of spread out into that next wood. And I kind of stopped shy of that. So I definitely wanted to go in and add some yellows and oranges to this wood also to kind of get it to slowly go into it, like fade out. So I'm redrawing some of my lines in there. And that's why you need to go over it with a second layer. I mean, it may look really good with just the first layer, which you can leave it that way if that's what you prefer and you like it and you're like, oh, I don't want to touch it no more, because it can get to that point where you're just like, I don't want to do any more to it. It looks good the way it is and I don't want to touch it. But yeah, just doing some little refreshers like this will definitely help it out so much, because adding in some more of those lines or making those lines stand out, just it helps it so much. So here I am going back over it with some of my raisins. I'm going back into it with some, like maybe some darker color browns, just kind of adding in some lines and some textures to this wood. I'm doing the same thing here, adding some more reds in on that raisins, giving it more depth and dimension there. Kind of doing the same thing there. And I'm going to be hopping around all over the place with this picture. Now I did start taking out some of my polychromos, and I used the color because I like the color the way it looked to kind of shade in and make it a little bit darker. And then I went in and used some more of the, for sure what that is, it's kind of similar to the dark indigo, but in the polychromos. And I just did use that pencil to kind of make the lines or darken up some areas. That's my warm earth, just going back in there and adding some more to it. So I was trying to darken up this area to add more shadow. More of that, kind of like the dark indigo in a polychromos, just adding in some of my lines in there before I actually darken it up, so that way they can show through. There I am with my Derwent Lightfast. I'm using my dark indigo to go over and add some more darker shadows to those areas. So I definitely wanted it darker, wanted it to be shadowy. I guess shadowy, or wanted to be in the shadows there. Adding in some of my yellow ochre for some of the highlights in there. But I will go back over it and add some oranges too. That one there is like the raisin or the marlot. I think I used some different colors in there. I had to be very careful, because using that dark indigo, if you were to go back over it with like more of a yellow tone to it, then it turns like a green color. So you have to be careful what colors you mix with. So here I am kind of going over it, and I wanted it to be more of a shadow, so that way you can kind of see some of my wood grain underneath. So I did use a little bit more OMS than what I would typically do on a second layer, just so that way it kind of, the wood kind of shows through underneath. It's kind of like doing a wash or a glaze, is basically what I did to my color pencil piece, but with color pencils. Now I got to give it more of a smoother blending, so I added a little bit more of the warm earth underneath of it, so that way it kind of blends down into it. It's a different color wood, or not wood color, but it's a brown in the polychromos that I'm using, so that way it can add in some more of my tones, my wood tones to it, and it has a sharper point that I can get a little bit more detail too. So that's why I switched over to the polychromos in some areas, is just to have those sharper, the sharper point to be able to get more finer details. Here I was kind of seeing how things would look. So I'm kind of testing out and doing some little sample areas. Now here I'm taking my orangey color and I'm going underneath that shadow, so that way it kind of gives a look of going from like the orangey color to more of a darker transition from the candlelight, just kind of shining on it. Adding in some more of that dark indigo in that board, just kind of shadowing it out because it has to be a little bit darker, and then adding some more dark indigo just lightly. And this is not really heavy, this is really light. I'm doing a little touch up of the indigo over in that corner too. So you have to be careful on how you blend with this to where you're not going too far out with it. I just wanted to kind of shadowy kind of go around the teacup handle. Okay, so now here I'm adding a little bit more detail to the wood grain on this red. I'm adding in some orangey colors to the center, like a little bit lighter of an orangey color. And then I'll be adding in some darker like browns just to kind of make those little wood grain marks. To make sure those stand out and are in there. So here I'm just hopping around, adding in some orange color to it, so that way I'm kind of toning it down with some oranges. And tone that down a little bit more with the orange. And up the bottom. And here I go with the orangey color right around the bottom of this also. There's some yellows, just kind of putting those in. And that's some of my brown ochre. More of my brown ochre around that little center. It was a little bit too light. Creating my lines. Putting those back in, maybe adding some little characters, like little details of the wood grain texture in there. Doing the same thing there. Adding in some lighter colors there. I'm using more of my primrose to kind of add in some of those white highlights. Maybe I'll use those whiter. It's not actually white, but I call it like a lighter highlight to it here and there. And like I said before, if you guys are new here, please click the subscribe. I'd love to have you on here. Also, it helps if you guys click the like button because that helps to kind of branch out the channel. And yeah, definitely every little bit helps. And like I said, if you guys have been with me, I want to say thank you for joining me again. I hope you guys are enjoying this. And yeah, for you, if you guys are new, definitely love to have you with them, have you with me. That's a hard one. I got tongue twisted. It's been a long day. Oh, but yeah, usually I post on Thursdays. If I don't post on a Thursday or I'm late or running behind, because you never know how my schedule's going to be, I will let you guys know on my Facebook page or yeah, or on my MeWe page. Also, I got the links below, so if you guys are happy to join, I give kind of an update if I'm going to be late or when a video is out or being posted. And on the artist group that I have on DC Fine Art Artist Group or Artist Community, that one there, you're welcome to post your pictures or things that you've done. You can post them there. And I kind of give every now and then I'll post on there like some things that I've gotten done and where I'm at now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is my finished background piece that I've done. And yeah, next week we'll be doing like hopefully finishing off this little candle, possibly working on the table. Not for sure where I'm going to go from there, if I'm going to do the little table or the little chest that he's on and then finish the candle, but definitely the candle has to be done. So I will definitely be working on that. And I hope to see you all next week. Bye, you guys.